Welcome back to Firefly Studios. My name is Kadia, and today we are going to answer a user's question. So the scenario that was lined out to me was they have a character that when they jump, they have the option between one or two landing animations to play. One is if it's a short jump and one if it's a long jump. And they were having a difficulty making it so the player could not move if it was a long jump. The idea being it takes a lot of effort and the player is basically like crowd controlled for that time. So there's a couple things we have to do to set that up. So I've got, on my end, I just used a hotkey to trigger which jump you want. I believe on their end they have a whole setup of code based off of how far you travel when you jump that determines which one it is. So right now, if I jump and I press I, we're in the short jump. So we have a little short jump animation and then we're reset. If I jump and press P, we're in the long jump and I can't move, and we go through this long animation before we're able to move again. So let's jump into how to set it up. So there's a couple things that need to be done. The first is in your animator. You need to make use of layers. Animation layers are super cool. I'm gonna make a whole video on them. Let me just briefly go over them in this video. So I have two different animation layers. I have a movement layer, which handles all of our movement, and then I've got an actions layer, which handles our attack. One of the common traps that you can fall in for the actions layer is the entry state. You want this to go to an empty state. And the way you do that is you just do right click, create empty. So this state has no movement data in it at all. It's just nothing. And the reason for that is both layers play at the same time. So what this allows is for my movement layer to handle moving, so I can move like this, and then I can attack while my walking animation is playing. Or while jumping, or like whenever. So this is a useful way to segment out actions from movement. And I just have a transition from any state into my attack, and then it goes to exit. This exit is important because this means that it resets it back to this new state after this animation is played. The way I set up the movement is I had to add in some parameters. So the way mine's set up is I have a speed parameter. It's a float that determines if I'm walking or idling, just based off if it's greater or less than 0. And then I've got a trigger for attacking that I don't use in this one. This is used in the other layer. I've got a on jump. I broke my jump into 3 animations. So I have a jump animation. What this animation is, if I select my player and go to scene view and switch to jump, this animation is the player lifting its arms up. So this is what plays when you start to jump. Then I have a air jump, and this is just a single frame. This is what it looks like when the player is in the air. So after my jump animation plays, this animation will stay playing until a landing animation is selected. Then it will go into either long land, which is a very long animation where the player kind of slumps forward a little bit, or it'll go into short land, which is a much shorter animation where the player just kind of settles their arms a little bit. And the way that's set up in the animator is after I have the is on jump trigger going from both my idle and walk animations to my jump animation, I then have a condition which just once jump fully plays, we're going into auto jump. The settings for that, by the way, are an exit time of 1, a transition duration of 0, with has exit time checked. Then we have our other 2 triggers. So I've got on short jump and on long jump. Those go to the corresponding jumps. Currently there is a little bit of blending. We can get rid of those if you choose. I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to say that it's 1 and 0 for both of these transitions, just to make them feel a little bit snappier. Then I've got my 2 animations, and then once both of these animations are fully played, or once both of these animations are fully played, we go to our idle animation. So the short animation is going to have an exit time of 1 and then transition duration of 0. The long is the same deal here. Pretty simple setup. So one thing of note is in our long land, I set up 2 events. That's achieved by hitting this little button here. And what these events do are call a function in our code, which we're going to dive into now. So see my earlier video on events to understand how events work. I will touch on it briefly here, but I go into more detail there. So I have here in my setup, this might not mirror your setup, but I have in a movement script which handles movement and an animation script that handles animation. The whole reason I have the events set up is so that they can communicate to each other. That's optional. You don't need that. What you do need is a bool that says is CC'd or some equivalent name. This is basically, is the player able to move or not? So if this is false, we can't move. Or other way around for mine because it's called is CC'd. If it's true, we're CC'd, we can't move. If it's false, we're not CC'd, we can move. So what I have here is, and again, this is all event stuff. We can skip past that. In the beginning of my update function and my fixed update, I use both because I use velocity to move my character, which requires physics. We have this simple if statement. If we are CC'd, return. What this means is that frame, we're going to just exit the update loop and not do any movement at all. This is a very easy way to make it so that we can't move if we are CC'd. Then I have tied to that 2 functions. I have a public void CC player, which sets is CC'd to true, and a public void recovered, which sets is CC'd to false. These are the 2 functions that are called by these 2 events in my animation. So at the beginning of my long land, we become CC'd. At the end, we call the other event, which is called recovered. The way you can access it, just in case you have any shenanigans going on, is the script with those functions must be on the same object as your animator component. So after we assign those, then we just call our triggers when we need to. So for me, again, I used events, so it's a little bit different. So I have in my update, if I press the I key or the P key, we trigger our short jump or a long jump. I didn't want to go into the whole calculation you have set up to determine which one it is, so I just have it keyed to buttons. You already have this part solved, so that shouldn't be a problem. And then I have when I jump in my physics update, I call my animate jump trigger, which happens down here in my animation script. It's just the reference to your animator, set trigger, and then the name of the trigger. So what this results in is I can move back and forth. If I press space and I'll jump, and then I'll go into short land. And the animation will play, and I can move. There's no CCing happening there. Technically, to make it a little bit cleaner, what I advise doing is inside of your short jump animation, do have a CC, but just for a very short period of time. So I'm going to set it up the same way. I'm going to CC the player here, and then at the end here, I am going to add another event and recover the player. It'll just make it will feel better. You won't ever have the player moving when they should be in a landing animation. So much shorter there. So my short jump is checked. I'm going to jump. I'm going to land. Can't move for a second. And then I'm good to move. If there's any ever points where my animation is sticking, it's merely because I'm using the buttons and I didn't press it fast enough. So I'm going to cue my long jump trigger. I'm going to press space to jump, and we're going to land. And I can't move for a long period of time. And then I can pick myself back up, and I can start moving. I hope you found this interesting. Please feel free to hit me up in the comments if you have any more questions. This should solve all your problems. And hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I hope to see you in the next one.